Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska. You can check out any forecasts or any updates to watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out for your area. You can also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391. Get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov. Taking a look now at the advisories and warning that we have out for the state, primarily in the interior part of the state, with some moving out by the Norton Sound area. We do have one warning out that is a winter storm warning for snow and blowing snow in that eastern portion of the Norton Sound area. And then we also have these winter weather advisories. All of these are out for snow and blowing snow. They're going to move from west to east. So right now, out by the Yukon Delta area, we have a winter weather advisory that is out right now until around midnight tonight for that snow and blowing snow. And as we progress further to the east, we're going to have these starting later, some around midnight. And then the latest ones in the upper Yukon Valley starting tomorrow morning. Now, all of these are going to last into Friday for the most part, many lasting into Friday evening. The later ones are going to be the ones that are furthest out to the east, whereas the ones closest towards Galena area are going to be out earlier in the afternoon hours, whereas out by the Yukon Delta again, that one is going to be expiring midnight tonight on Thursday night. Again, these are all for snow and blowing snow, making travel conditions difficult with the reduction in visibilities, where that could diminish down to a half mile or less. And the winter storm warning, visibilities could drop down to a quarter mile or less in that blowing snow out by the Stebbins area. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, we'll start off in the west. Out over the Bering Sea, we have a low pressure system near the western Aleutians that is pushing a front into the southern portions of the Bering Sea and out over the central Aleutian Islands, bringing up moisture from the south with that system. We have another weaker low in the northern part of the Bering Sea that is pushed out over towards the west coast of the state, bringing cloud cover and precipitation to those areas. Out over mainland Alaska, clearer skies with high pressure dominating the area, allowing for some nice conditions for much of mainland Alaska. And then down in the Panhandle area, some lingering showers with some lower cloud cover out over the area. Taking a look at our forecast for the remainder of the day, we do have those showers lingering through much of the Panhandle area, especially as we get further towards the mountainous areas, and then some areas along the Gulf Coast and the northern portions that are mixing with rain as well, a little bit warmer near the coastline. High pressure out over mainland Alaska, but still some lighter snow over portions of the interior and up by the upper Yukon Valley and in the Brooks Range. As we move out to the west coast of the state, however, we do have that low pressure system pushing in towards St. Lawrence Island that is bringing in some showers off of the Bering Coast, and that is going to push in some of that blowing snow to the Yukon Delta area and up around the Norton Sound area, and warm enough in southern locations around the Kuskokwim Delta to have a mix of rain and snow. Out over the central portions of the Bering Sea, still expecting snow, but that other system that's coming in towards the western Aleutian Islands is bringing up enough warm air to bring rain to the central and western Aleutians. However, on the backside of that system, we have some of that northerly flow wrapping back in, starting to pull down some of the colder air and mix some of those rain showers back in with some snow. As we move into tonight, we can see that snow making its way out over the western Aleutians, where the locations closer towards the low pressure system still going to bring in some rain showers to the central Aleutian Islands. Out ahead of this system, still colder, we're seeing some snow up by the St. Matthew Island area and up by St. Lawrence Island as well. And then as we move out over mainland Alaska, our low pressure system that was near St. Lawrence Island today is going to push in tonight over the Seward Peninsula area, extending the snow coverage out into those western and central locations of the interior, starting to bring that heavier snowfall to those locations, but still bringing snow to the west coastline out through the YK Delta area. We're also going to have some lingering snow showers out over the eastern portions of the Brooks Range, but high pressure dominating much of south central Alaska and the Panhandle area, keeping all the showers primarily further to the north and west. However, some light showers near the Juneau area expected for tonight. We do have another system approaching from the south, quite a bit of ways away from Kodiak Island at this point, but coming in that direction, bringing up some warmer air and some rain showers to the area. As we move into Friday, we can see that system pushing further to the north, starting to bring some rain to areas around the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutian Islands. But that high pressure further out to the east, out over the northern part of the Gulf of Alaska, keeping that system somewhat at bay and holding it off from Kodiak Island, at least for Friday. That high pressure is keeping clear skies for the Panhandle area and much of South Central as well. But as we move into the interior, we're going to see some snow showers stuck between two highs that is going to just linger over the central portion of the state, continuing to bring that snow through much of the day, well into Friday evening. Some isolated areas in the interior that will see a mix of rain and snow. Still, however, expecting it to be primarily snow at this time, where we are going to have those accumulations getting up to as high as around 10 inches for areas around that eastern portion of Norton Sound. So you move up along the Arctic coastline, high pressure is going to dominate the area, keeping the snow in the Brooks Range and out along the west coast of the state. And then we are going to expect a clearing of the snow as we push down into southwest Alaska towards the Bristol Bay area as well. Out over the Bering Sea, we have that low moving up into the central and northern portions of the Bering, pushing rain ever closer to the Pribilof Islands, but not quite there expected on Friday. However, we will have rain throughout the central and western Aleutians from those lows out over the central and southern part of the Bering. Then as we look into Saturday, those lows are going to diminish, but still have lingering showers over the much of the Bering Sea, where northern locations will expect to see snow, but southern locations expecting to be a little bit warmer, see some rain there. Rain for the central and eastern Aleutian Islands, another low out over near the eastern Aleutian Islands, bringing rain to the area and to the Alaska Peninsula. So the second system that we saw coming up towards the Kodiak Island area becoming closer, and at this point on Saturday bringing a mix of rain and snow to northern locations of Kodiak and rain to much of the mainland part of the island. Still pushing into the Gulf of Alaska, not quite making it to the Panhandle area. Still expecting clear skies on Saturday for the Panhandle and much of south central Alaska. Some isolated showers as we move up to northern portions of the interior and into the Brooks Range, and then western portions along the Arctic coastline, expecting to see some light snow. As we drop down the west coast, we will see some snow around Seward Peninsula and down by the Norton Sound area. And then we will see that snow in the YK Delta area start to mix with rain as we get near to Bristol Bay. We do have a second system coming up towards the western Aleutians from the North Pacific, warm enough to bring rain at this time, but not going to make it to the islands on Saturday. Taking a look now at our temperatures, starting with Friday morning low temps, will stay out in the Aleutian Islands, dropping down to the mid-30s for the Aleutians, a little bit colder for St. Paul, dropping down to 32 degrees. And then we will see in the Bristol Bay area, temperatures dropping into the lower to mid-20s, a little bit colder by Iliamna, dropping down to 19 there. In the YK Delta area, in the mid to upper 20s for most locations. Aniak a little bit colder, 23 degrees is expected for the low. Moving up towards the Seward Peninsula on the southern side, we are expecting temps in the 20s. And then as we move up into the Kotzebue Sound area, dropping down into the single digits with Point Hope down below zero at -1. All negative along the north coast around -10, but as we get back into the interior through past the Brooks Range, we are expecting temperatures to be a little bit warmer. For western locations in the interior, staying in the 20s, but as we get further to the east, we're expecting temperatures to get colder, and as we get by Eagle, expecting to drop down to 0. Then as we move into south central Alaska into the teens, for many interior locations, a little bit colder. Copper River Basin, we will see Glen Allen dropping down to -4, but along the North Gulf Coast, expecting temperatures to only drop into the lower to mid-20s, with Kodiak staying a little bit warmer, only dropping down to 28 degrees for Friday morning. Down in the Panhandle area, temperatures dropping down into the mid to upper 20s, some locations near to the Gulf of Alaska, staying above 30 degrees, Sitka only dropping down to 32. As we move to Friday afternoon, temperatures in the Panhandle are going to move right back up into the 40s, with Ketchikan being one of the warmest in the state, getting up to 46 degrees. Staying in the 40s along the North Gulf Coast, with Valdez getting up to 43, and Cordova getting up to 42, as well as Kodiak Island. The rest of South Central is going to get up into the mid to upper 30s, with some locations getting up right around 40 degrees, Kenai getting up to 40. In the interior part of the state, locations getting up to the mid-30s, a little bit warmer again as we get further to the west. That as we move up towards the Brooks Range, we will see temperatures getting to the mid-20s, with Bettles getting to 27. Through the pass at 14 degrees, and along the Arctic coastline, getting above 0 for most locations. AKwx staying a little bit colder, staying in the negatives for afternoon highs at -1. Kotzebue Sound area in the teens, a little bit warmer at Shishmaref, 22 degrees expected high. Then in the 30s around the Norton Sound area. Gamble staying a little bit colder at 29 degrees. Mid-30s as we move into the YK Delta area. And right around 40 degrees for the Bristol Bay area. And then lower 40s through the Aleutian Islands. Shimmy a little bit colder at 38. Saturday morning lows, we're going to drop down into the mid-30s along the Aleutian Islands. Right around 30 degrees for the Bristol Bay area and the mid-20s for the YK Delta area, as well as the Norton Sound area. As we move up north into the Kotzebue Sound area, expecting to get colder as we push further to the north into the teens for much of Kotzebue Sound, and well below zero for locations along the Arctic coastline. As we move back into the interior, we're going to see temperatures in the 20s as we get into the north or southeastern portions of the interior, a little bit colder, staying in the teens by Delta Junction and Northway, and then down in the in south central locations, dropping down to right around 20 degrees, a little bit colder in the basins, Glen Allen dropping down to 5 degrees, and in the mid-20s for much of the Panhandle, with Sitka staying a little bit warmer, 32 degrees. Saturday afternoon highs, we are expecting temperatures in the Panhandle to get mid to upper 40s, with Haines getting up all the way to 51 degrees. Into the 40s for much of south central and right around 40 degrees for much of the interior, with mid-20s expected along the Arctic coastline, and then right around 30s for all of the west coast of the state, into the lower 40s for the Bristol Bay area, and the lower 40s for the Aleutian Islands as well, with St. Paul at 36.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For aviation, we'll start off with a quick look at our flying weather for Friday morning. IFR conditions out over much of the central and western part of the Bering Sea, with some MVFR conditions over central and western Aleutians. Some of those MVFR conditions spreading towards the Pribilof Islands as well, and then some more IFR along the west coast of the state from the Bristol Bay area up through the Seward Peninsula and into central portions of the interior. South Central Alaska and the Panhandle both look to be VFR for Friday morning. Friday afternoon, those locations will remain VFR. Some of the conditions out over the interior will clear up to be some marginal VFR conditions that will go up into the Brooks Range as well, and still some MVFR and IFR conditions out over the Seward Peninsula. However, Southwest Alaska will be VFR Friday afternoon. Out over the central and western portions of the Bering and Aleutians, we are expecting to see some MVFR conditions. As we move into Saturday morning, primarily MVFR conditions out over the central, western Bering and Aleutians, but then an area of IFR conditions moving through the Pribilof Islands and the eastern Aleutians. Southwest Alaska is having some MVFR conditions encroach on the VFR conditions, and we are also going to see some IFR and MVFR conditions in the interior portions of the state. South Central Alaska and the Panhandle will continue to be primarily VFR. As we move into Saturday afternoon, Panhandle once again will be VFR throughout the afternoon hours. Much of the mainland Alaska will also be VFR, with some areas of MVFR in the Brooks Range and down the west coast of the state, with some areas of IFR as another system starts to push into southwest Alaska. Also have some IFR conditions for the Alaska Peninsula and down in the eastern Aleutian Islands, but MVFR conditions as we get further to the west. Taking a look at our passes for Friday, starting up north in Anaktuvuk Pass, IFR conditions improving to VFR in the afternoon. Adigan Pass will also start off IFR, then improve to VFR in the afternoon. Lake Kramer will start off marginal, improving to VFR in the afternoon. Rainy Pass will be VFR throughout the day on Friday. Windy Pass will also remain VFR for the day. Isabel Pass, VFR conditions expected, as well as at Mentasta Pass. Tanita Pass also expecting to see VFR conditions. Portage Pass also expecting to see VFR. And then Chilkoot and White both expecting to see VFR conditions throughout the day on Friday. Taking a look at our freezing levels, our surface freezing line riding through the Panhandle and then up along the North Gulf Coast, down through the Alaska Peninsula and out into the northern portions of the Bering Sea. There's some warmer air to the south of the Panhandle where we have freezing levels up to as high as 8,000 feet. For our icing, out over the western portions of the Bering Sea, we do have some areas of icing below 3,000 feet that extend down to the western Aleutians. Another system incoming from the North Pacific, bringing areas of icing between 3,000 and 10,000 feet towards the Alaska Peninsula. Below 3,000 feet expected for southwest Alaska, and then below 10,000 as we get up by the Seward Peninsula. Then out for the eastern portions of the interior, between 3,000 and 10,000 feet is expected on Friday. For our jet stream, primarily westerly flow over much of the state, especially over mainland Alaska, where we have a 105 knot branch of the jet out over the western portions of the interior. Down by the Panhandle area, another westerly jet that is going to push in at about 110 knots, and then southwesterly flow out over the Bering Sea, getting up to as high as 70 knots. Taking us down to 9,000 feet, we have southerly winds at over the central and eastern portions of the Bering Sea. 35 to 45 knots is expected, weaker as we get by the islands, and then weak flow out over western portions of the Bering and Aleutians. Out over mainland Alaska, primarily southwesterly flow, increasing in speed as we move further to the north up into the interior, strong as 40 to 45 knots, and down around 40 knots along the Arctic coastline. Down over the Panhandle area, northern portions with light winds, but as we get to southern locations, we are expecting winds to pick up to around 40 knots out of a northwesterly direction. Down to 3,000 feet, flow is significantly weaker out over the Panhandle area, and then weaker flow out over south central Alaska as well. Southwesterly winds over the mainland, stronger as we get out towards western interior and out by the Yukon Delta. 30 to 40 knots expected there, and then 30 knots up along the Arctic coastline out of that southwest direction. Down in the Bering Sea, we have southerly winds in the central and eastern portions of the Bering, 35 to 45 knots, strongest near the low pressure system. Flow around the islands and Alaska Peninsula around 35 knots, primarily out of a southerly direction. With our low out over the western Bering, we do have flow on the western side out of the north, about 45 knots, dropping down to around 30 knots as it gets by the western Aleutians. Taking us to our turbulence, starting off over the central and western areas. With those stronger winds moving over the islands, we are expecting turbulence below 3,000 feet for the central and western Aleutians, below 4,000 feet for the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And then as we move into the interior part of the state, some stronger winds expected from the Yukon Delta, below 3,000 feet there, moving into the interior below 5,000 feet that extends up into the upper Yukon Valley.
Hey there, stargazers. Trace here, and astronomy sometimes means burning the candle at both ends. But you can look at the sky even if you're one of those morning people, especially this week. Depending how early you get up, you should get quite the show in the southeast. Because first, Jupiter is going to emerge from the horizon, then Saturn, then Mars, all in this beautiful parade of planets. And if you're really lucky, as the sun rises, the planets are going to slowly disappear. But because they're so much closer and brighter than the stars, you're going to get the show for a bit longer. Technically, stars are up in the sky all the time, but the scattering of the sunlight as it hits our atmosphere obscures them during the day. So you still can do astronomy when the sun's out. Just remember, keep looking up.
If you've been watching this series, you know that NASA has scientists posted all over the world studying Earth's frozen regions. We've got people exploring ice sheets, glaciers, permafrost, sea ice, snow, and even ice on other planets. But even our top scientists need a little backup sometimes.
Do you like going outside to do science?
Yeah,
Why?
because it's fun.
Yeah. What's your favorite part?
Frost tube.
Frost tube! Cool!
In this bonus episode of Cryosphere, we're following the micro-explorers that are helping NASA collect data from their own backyard.
Do you think it's going to be frozen?
Yeah.
Yes? Why?
Because it's very frozen!
Here's the idea. Students construct a frost tube that gets put into a hole in undisturbed and uncompacted soil. During the cold months, students will measure the depth at which water in the frost tube freezes, indicating that the surrounding soil has frozen. This is one of many citizen science projects facilitated by GLOBE, the Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment program.
What's going on? What did you find out?
It's the ice!
How far down is the ice? So is there still liquid in there?
It's a worldwide program that, so far, has collected over 130 million measurements from more than 10 million students in 113 countries.
Are you scientists?
Yeah.
These measurements are added to a massive worldwide database that's free and open to the public.
GLOBE connects my students with the rest of the world through science and looking at climate change and how it's affecting the future.
GLOBE teachers like Terry are transforming the way kids see science and how they'll respond to changes in their future environment.
Let me see your happy face. Ah!
Actually, we were so impressed with the kids of John Fredson's school that we decided to show their work to the scientists in the original NASA Explorers Cryosphere series. And they had a couple things to say.
Oh my god, that's awesome.
Oh my god.
Do you like going outside to do science? Why? How far down is the ice?
That's awesome.
Wow, this is really, really cool.
Hey students from Miss Terry's class, I just got to see your video. I was so impressed that you guys were braving the conditions of the snow and all the crazy stuff to go and learn more about the permafrost and where the water layer is right outside your school. That looked incredible.
It is so exciting to see you guys and girls doing such great work as we watch our planet change over time.
Hey there, young scientists. Looks like you guys are doing some amazing things. Remember to keep warm and take notes, and also stay curious.
Oh my god, this is awesome. I love seeing the enthusiasm of these kids. They're outside, it's obviously really cold, but everyone is so excited to be out there making measurements for NASA. That's wicked cool.
Because you're so right, science is so fun, and I really hope that you'll continue believing in that. The best piece of advice I ever got was, whatever you do, do your best.
And from all of us here at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, remember, dare mighty things.
So keep up the great work. Make sure that you're having fun no matter what. That's the key thing about pursuing a career in science. Make sure it's something that you love. And I'm really impressed. So hopefully we'll take the lessons you're learning and apply them when we explore our solar system.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for the marine section. We'll take a quick look at our ice edge. We do still have some polynyas around, especially on the north-facing coastlines, such as St. Lawrence Island or in parts of the Norton Sound, where we do have some of that filling in. We are expecting some southerly flow over these next couple days that will start to push the ice edge back up to the north, but also expand polynyas on the north-facing coastlines along the west coast and up by some of the islands like Nunavik Island and St. Lawrence Island. For the southeast portion of the state in the inside waters, we have northerly winds 20 to 25 knots with seas 3 to 5 feet. Out over the Gulf, we do have northerly winds 10 to 20 miles or 20 knots. That's the strongest as we get further to the south. Seas as high as 8 feet. Then on Saturday, out over the Gulf waters, we are expecting winds to become more easterly, 10 to 15 knots, and then seas as high as 6 feet. In the inside waters, 15 to 20 knots, seas as high as 4 feet. For Friday for south central Alaska, northerly flow out over much of the Gulf around 10 knots. Prince William Sound as well, seas up to as high as 6 feet. And then becoming more easterly by the Barren Islands around 15 knots there, and then 10 to 15 knots out of the north for Cook Inlet. On Saturday, winds picking up a little bit, especially around the Barren Islands. Easterly flow continuing, 30 knots expected for the speeds with seas as high as 13 feet on the Gulf side. Cook Inlet, 15 to 20 knots out of the northeast, and then easterly winds, 15 to 25 knots along much of the Gulf, strongest as we get further to the west, and then Prince William Sound, northeast winds around 10 knots. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, starting off by Kodiak Island, easterly flow, 25 knots there. On the Pacific side of the peninsula, around 30 knots out of the east, and on the Bering side, around 20 knots out of the east. Seas as high as 11 feet on the Pacific side. Then as we move into Saturday, still expecting easterly flow all around the peninsula, 25 to 30 knots. Stronger as we get by Kodiak Island, where we'll see winds up to 35 knots out of a northeasterly direction in Shelikof Strait. For the Aleutian chain, we are going to see some southerly winds over much of the central and eastern Aleutians, 20 to 25 knots, with seas as high as 10 feet. But as we get out by the western Aleutians, flow wrapping around low pressure in the southern part of the Bering, going to be around 25 knots out of a westerly direction. And then on Saturday, winds dropping down 10 to 15 knots at all locations for the Aleutians, seas as high as 9 feet on the Pacific side nearest the eastern Aleutians. Up along the west coast of the state, primarily southerly flow, 20 to 25 knots, seas as high as 12 feet by St. Matthew Island. And then on Saturday, on northern location, still a southerly direction, 15 to 20 knots, switching to easterly by Nunavik Island, 15 to 25 knots, strongest south of the island. And then as we drop down by the Pribilof Islands, out of the north around 10 knots, seas as high as 9 feet, strongest or highest again by St. Matthew Island. Up along the Arctic coastline, start off along the by the Beaufort Sea out of a southerly direction around 10 knots, becoming westerly as we move further to the west around 15 knots. North winds by Point Hope around 10 to 15 knots, and then becoming southerly by the Bering Strait around 25 knots. On Saturday, flow becoming southerly all along the west coast, 20 to 25 knots, and then southeasterly along the Arctic coastline around 20 knots there. Recap for tonight's weather. We have a low pressure system moving into southwestern portions of the Bering, bringing in some warmer air to the central Aleutians and some rain, but some of the cold air wrapping around this system, bringing in some snow to the western Aleutian Islands. We do have a low pressure system out by the Norton Sound area that's going to have snow for much of that area, and then extending that out throughout the night into locations of the western and central portions of the interior, where we do have winter weather advisories out for much of the interior. We're going to see some heavier snow tonight and through much of Friday. We'll also see some snow and blowing snow conditions around the Norton Sound area, especially on the eastern locations where we do have a winter storm warning out for snow and blowing snow. And then we also have the winter weather advisory for the Yukon Delta that is out until midnight tonight for snow and blowing snow. High pressure is going to dominate much of south central Alaska and the Panhandle for tonight, keeping much of the precipitation at bay with the exception of some lighter showers by the Juneau area. As we move into Friday, that high pressure is going to remain over the Panhandle and south central Alaska, keeping any precip out over more of the interior part of mainland Alaska, where we'll see continued snow throughout the day into the evening on Friday. And there's a chance for some of that to mix with some rain in more interior locations. Up along the Arctic coastline, more high pressure, keeping the precipitation in the Brooks Range. And then through the Norton Sound area, where we'll continue to see snow. And then our low pressure system out over the Bering, bringing warmer air to the Aleutian Islands and the Alaska Peninsula, as another system comes up from the south, starting to bring more warm air to the peninsula area. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.